Good Tuesday morning to you. This is Mark Pierce of Church Requel, and I'm up earlier than most of the rest of the family today. Only 2 more days to go in 2008. Today's going to be a great day here at our home because my brother and his family and my sister and her family and my dad and all the clan will be coming in. Everybody's going to be staying here tonight, so all of the really all the floor space will be used as bedrooms. But I certainly want to finish off this year strong with you and finish our Bible study at least through the rest of this year. So let's take our Bibles and look at a very difficult passage. We are now up to Matthew chapter 2, reading 16 through 19. Then Herod, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, became furious, and he sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be comforted because they were no more. This is a tough passage. It is also a glorious passage. It all comes down to a matter of perspective. Certainly the gospel writer of Matthew was telling this story from the standpoint of God's provision for his anointed son and the protection that he had provided for Jesus and for Joseph and for Mary. But we see that this is a very evil world, and the gospel writer does not attempt to not tell the whole story. Matthew, of all the Gospels, is the only one to record this deed. We actually don't see this recorded in any other place outside of the Gospel of Matthew. In other words, when we look at some of the objective historical documents of Herod the Great, we don't see the evidence of killing, murdering, massacring the baby children of Bethlehem. But it certainly is in character of who Herod was. After all, this is a man that killed his wife, killed many of his sons, killed the leading citizens of Jerusalem, just so there would be mourning and weeping on the day of his own death. So the fact that this isn't recorded in some other historical documents really just goes to say how not out of the ordinary this really was, because Herod was a man who was very protective of his throne. We read in verse 8 of chapter 2 that Herod had asked the wise men to come back and to let him know when they had found the child. Clearly it was not Herod's intent to worship the child, as he said, but was his intent to murder the Christ child, to prevent anyone from taking his throne. And when Herod had been tricked, is the word that we see in the ESV. The actual word has this idea of a child mocking someone else. In other words, Herod felt totally made fun of by the wise men, that he had been tricked. Herod went with plan B. His first plan was simply to kill the Christ child himself, but now he said, I'm just going to slaughter all of the male children age 2 and under. And again, it didn't have to even be that old, but he just wanted to make sure that he got whoever it would be. In the ESV and most of our translations, it does talk about the male children, but In the NRSV and some of the other very literal translations of the Gospel of Matthew, it simply says all children. And again, this would have been very much in keeping with Herod, that if he couldn't get the one he wanted, he would just kill them all. Boys, girls, age 1, age 2. Just a very, very difficult passage. Glorious from the standpoint of God's protection for Jesus and Mary and Joseph, but a tough passage for the rest of us, because it's not something that we should easily gloss over. What must it have been like for the parents in the middle of the night probably to have been rounded up and bring all their children without being told, why or what was going on, and to see their innocent young being killed before their eyes. This is the world that Jesus lived in, and sadly it's the world that we live in as well. We can't give a good explanation of it. I think it would be wrong of us to theologically try to explain this away, to say, well, God protected Jesus, and isn't that great? And yet, if I'm the parent, well, why didn't God protect my child? Ultimately, we come down to Psalm 22, verse 1. And this is a place where we all come to at some point in our life. Why, God? Why? It's okay to ask those questions. On the one hand, we want to have the faith to believe that God does ultimately have a plan, and that this world as we know it and see it today is not his ultimate plan, and that there will come a time when things will be set to rights. But we're not there yet. And so when we come to tragedy in our life that we could dismiss as natural causes, or even when someone horrendously does something to take a life away, we have to fall back and say, God, why? Not a great answer, not an easy answer. And anyone who tries to make up a quick, easy, theological, well, God will work all things out for good, really hasn't struggled with this. I'm here to tell you this morning on the next to the last day of 2008 that it's okay to struggle sometimes with the questions of why, and not to too quickly come in with answers that are too simple or too easy. Thanks for joining me this morning, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, the last day of 2008.